Who remembers this? About a week prior to this, we had this story about this guy aboard the USS Shiloh. The USS Shiloh is a Ticonderoga class missile cruiser, very, very similar to the Arleigh Burke class, which the USS Fitzgerald is. This particular young man had been reported to have gone overboard and had this huge sea search with the Japan Coast Guard and Navy, only to have found him hiding on board 5 days later. Now, this young man is a gas turbine systems technician, mechanical, third class. He's an engine guy. You would have to ask yourself, with no prior history of any issues, what would make this kid all of a sudden decide to hide for 5 days? And how would he be able to facilitate such a thing? He would have needed access to fresh water, probably would have needed food. How could he have done this by himself? This guy's not a evasion expert. This isn't a SEAL. He's a tech. Well, there's this other blurb too that I'm sure nobody has read about. 4 Muslim crew members aboard the USS Shiloh, currently deployed to the 7th Fleet Area of Operations, began a month-long fast during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. That's interesting. Muslims celebrating Ramadan aboard a U.S. Navy destroyer where, strangely enough, 1 week prior to the quote-unquote accident with the Fitzgerald, we have an engine technician that tries to go missing. That is a strange coincidence, folks. Especially since we know we have a whole bunch of lies coming out from the Navy about this track. We also know we had this destroyer in Subic Bay with Philippine civilians on board 10 weeks prior. We've covered that. It makes me wonder if one of those 4 Muslims aboard had gotten compromised. If that kid might have been one. And might have had an attack of conscience because perhaps he had revealed something to somebody about the operations aboard a destroyer, or the layout of a destroyer, or a quick and easy way of disabling engines aboard a destroyer. Or maybe he just relayed the plans of the engines. And that's what happened here. This is a week later, after this issue with this kid. A week later. You know, I have posited theories of EMP weapons, and, and rightfully so, people have come and said, well, there's holes in this and there's holes in that. There's holes in everything. There's as many holes in the Navy story as there is in any of mine. And a lot of this is thinking out loud. That's what most of these videos are. And it's just to talk about myself for a minute here, and I don't like to do that. Yeah, I take a smartphone camera and I point it at the screen. I'm not a professional video maker. I don't want to be one. I have never had any idea that I was going to be a YouTube personality or anything like that. I have a real job. Actually, I have 2. So I will try to make these as easy to watch as I can, but back to the story. Here's another theory. Here's the ACX crystal track. If this was the track up here somewhere of the Fitzgerald, and they saw this over here and it turned toward to it as such, I wonder if this 90-degree turn was a close point for this ship. People have mentioned looking at the ACX crystal how high it was in the water and how it didn't look like it was carrying cargo equivalent to what was supposedly shown aboard. I'm wondering if there was, perhaps, given that the USS Fitzgerald was an anti-China asset, perhaps a crew of Chinese or Russian special forces aboard. And I know, people are like, oh my God, here he goes. That's fine. That's the first thing I thought when it came out of my mouth the first time. But follow me on this, folks. Or perhaps from a Muslim country that had compromised that kid aboard the Shiloh. There's 4 Muslims aboard, celebrating Ramadan during this time. And they had gotten information from this kid. And he was having an attack of conscience and was feeling guilty. And that's why he hid. Maybe he thought he had been made. Maybe he had made some arrangement with these people to be pulled off the ship after having given the information and they left him behind. Who knows? And at night, with the watch being low and there being a skeleton crew and this just being a container ship and not raising any red flags with the destroyer, the story is that somehow this giant container ship was able to sneak up on the starboard side of a destroyer. What about a couple of small boats with maybe a dozen or so operatives? They come up behind the thing. They get the people on board. They have one crew go detain the captain, one detain the bridge crew, and one go down and disable the engines. Just like that. Maybe a crew to disable the communications. Boom, boom, boom. Who knows what information they got from that kid aboard the Shiloh? Or what information they might have gleaned from the guy from Colombia we covered that had compromised the information of his pals. So they get the ship to stop. And they tell him, look, nobody's going to be hurt. We're just going to, make negotiations with your government. If nobody resists, nobody gets hurt. Captain's in his quarters. The bridge crew is doing as instructed. With their communications out, engines at a full stop, most of the crew still below decks asleep. They do it quickly. There's 5 watchmen, though, that lose their lives because they have to take out the watchman. They radio back. They don't tell, of course, the crew what the plan is to this ship. The ship makes, now remember, we're talking here, this all happened here from point B to point A is only an hour, not even an hour. Disable the ship. This thing makes its turn back. They get back aboard their boats. They get off. Before the crew can do anything, this cargo ship slams into them. They've got water aboard. They don't have time to report back to the Navy what's really happened. They've got to secure their ship. This ship then reports an accident and moves on. That crew hops off. Nobody can say anything else happened. And since it's this crew that reported the accident, they don't think anything of it, even though they're all Filipinos. And we know about the new People's Army and their issue with the U.S. Navy and its dealings with the Philippine Navy. Is this a possibility, folks? This is Ramadan. We've seen Muslims do much, much worse things, and we've seen them do much more complex things. 9/11 come to mind. I'm not saying it's fact, but it is damn strange. It is damn strange how we have a story that says here at 1:30 there was a collision so violent that it disabled all communications aboard the ship to the point where the command crew had to use sat phones just to communicate on board. Yet 36 minutes later, we have a kid below decks with access to Wi-Fi Maybe this kid was a bigger hero than we thought he was. Maybe this kid figured out what was going on and he was trying to get a call out. Maybe those terrorists disabled what they thought was the main communications, but accidentally left the Wi-Fi up. Oh, and those 5 watchmen. Do you remember the story about how they said 5 were killed and 2 were trying to rescue? And they lost their lives in an attempt to go down and they had to shut the hatch? I'm wondering if those 5 kids that were disabled by the boarding crew were put below decks and weren't able to be saved. And with the vast majority of the crew not even knowing what was going on, and the captain being held in his cabin at the time, it would explain why he was there. It would explain why the ship was dead in the water. And those 2 that went down to try to find the others found 5 bodies. And I know this sounds horrible, but maybe they had to be sacrificed so that the truth didn't come out. That they were found having been shot. Because 5 sounds like the right number for a watch crew for that ship for that time of night. Is this fact? No, absolutely not. All circumstantial evidence. But folks, like I said, everything prior to 9/11 would have been circumstantial. Even all of the terrorist attacks that we've seen since then would have been circumstantial prior to the event. Even the one in England. It was just some guy carrying a bag. You didn't know what was in it. Somebody said, hey, see that guy carrying a bag? It's a bomb. They would have said, how do you know it's a bomb? Well, I just got a feeling. Well, sorry, we can't do something based on a feeling. So until people start getting their minds right and getting their heads out of the sand and start recognizing lies from the military when they see it, and we continue to let sailors celebrate Ramadan aboard our Navy vessels, I don't know how we get out of this, folks. So I am sure the comment section on this one is going to be full of all sorts of interesting things. So thank you very much for the views. Like, share, subscribe. We'll see you next time.